The alpha was dying. Not slowly. Not gently. He was burning from the inside, the way only a curse can burn, from the marrow outward, from the soul out through the skin. His warriors stood around his bed of wolf pelts and dark stone, their faces carved from grief and helplessness. His beta pressed a cold cloth to his alpha's brow, but the black veins spreading from Kale's chest told them everything. No cloth would stop this. No herb. No prayer to the moon. The old healer, Marin, silver-haired, bone-thin, ancient as the forest itself, knelt at the foot of the bed and opened the sacred text. The one wrapped in wolf leather. The one no one had touched in 3 generations. She read in silence for a long time. Then she went still. The kind of still that frightens people. "What is it?" the beta asked. "Marin, what does it say?" She looked up, and the expression on her face was not relief. It was something closer to dread. "There is a cure," she whispered. The room exhaled. "But it will not be easy to obtain." She closed the book slowly. "Because the only substance powerful enough to break this curse is the blood of the one he wronged most deeply." Silence fell like a stone into water, then rippled. "Whose blood?" one warrior asked. Marin's eyes dropped to the dying alpha. "You know whose," she said. And every man in that room did know. They all remembered the girl. They all remembered the day their alpha stood before the entire pack, chest proud, eyes cold, and spoke words that could never be unsaid. "I reject you. You are nothing to me. You never were." She had not screamed. She had not begged. She had simply looked at him, just once, with eyes that held something none of them had been able to name. Then she had walked away, and she had not come back. That was 2 years ago. Now their alpha was dying, and the only cure lived in the veins of the woman he had thrown away. The question was not whether her blood could save him. The question, the one that burned hotter than Kale's fever, was this: would she let it? 2 years earlier, the great hall of Darkmoor keeps smelled of pine resin and torch smoke. It always did, in winter. Seraphine had loved that smell once. She did not love it now. She stood at the center of the stone floor with her hands at her sides and her chin level, refusing, with everything she had, to let it drop, refusing to give them that. Around her, the Darkmoor pack stood in a wide ring. Hundreds of them, ranked warriors, she-wolves, elders, pups pressed to their mother's legs. All watching, all waiting. Kale stood 3 feet away from her. He was the kind of man who filled a room without meaning to. Tall, dark-haired, built like something the mountain had grown rather than birthed. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, pale gray, electric, and they had once looked at her with a warmth that had made her believe, completely and foolishly, that she was safe. Those eyes were cold now. "This was arranged by our fathers," Kale said. His voice carried easily. "It always did. Not by me." Seraphine said nothing. She had learned, very quickly, that words would not help her here. "The moon goddess may have placed a bond between us." He paused. "But a bond is not a command. I am the alpha of Darkmoor. I choose my mate, and I choose based on what is best for this pack." He let that land. Let it sink into her skin like cold water. "You are not what is best for this pack." There it was. She had known it was coming. She had heard the whispers for months, had seen the way his inner circle looked at her, with that particular kind of contempt that powerful people reserve for those they consider beneath them. Useless, they called her. Not to her face. But she had ears. She had always had ears. "You carry no wolf gifts," Kale continued. "You cannot shift completely. You have no combat skill. No political value. No power that I can see or use." His jaw tightened. "A mate should strengthen an alpha. You would only weaken me." The hall was silent. Not the comfortable kind of silent. The kind that presses against your ears. "Therefore," he said, and his voice did not waver, not even slightly, "I invoke the right of separation. Before this pack, before the fire and the moon, I reject the mating bond." The pain hit her the same moment he said the words. Like a blade pulled from a wound she hadn't known was there. She felt it in her chest, a tearing, a snapping, the bond dissolving at his command. It left something hollow, something ragged-edged and raw. She breathed through it. Just breathed. She would not fall. Not here. Not in front of them. "I reject you," Kale said quietly. "You are nothing to me. You never were." Seraphine looked at him. Just once. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, and in that time she made herself see him clearly. Not the man she had hoped he was, but the man he had just proven himself to be. Then she turned around, and she walked, past the warriors, past the elders, past the wide-eyed pups and the she-wolves with their pity-shaped mouths. No one stopped her. No one tried. She walked through the great doors of Darkmoor Keep, out into the winter forest, and she kept walking until the torchlight was gone and the only light left was the moon. High, full, cold. She stopped beneath it. And then, only when no one could hear her, only when the trees were her only witnesses, she pressed her fist to her chest and let herself feel it. The hollow place where the bond had been. The absence that had a shape exactly the size of everything she'd believed in. She breathed. In. Out. Then she lifted her chin to the moon. The same moon that had, apparently, decided she deserved this. And she made herself a promise. I will not die here. I will not disappear into this wound. I will become something. Something he cannot name. Something he cannot use. Something entirely, irreversibly mine. The moon did not respond. But she felt it, somewhere beneath her breastbone. Something shifting. Something old. Something waking up. She did not know, standing there in the winter dark, that what had just woken was the most dangerous thing in the known pack territories. She would find out. She walked for 3 days. No shelter. No pack escort. Nothing but the cloak on her back, the boots on her feet, and the hollow ache she was slowly, deliberately, teaching herself to breathe around. Rejection without a pack was not simply loneliness. It was exposure. In a world built on hierarchy and bloodline, a mateless, packless she-wolf was prey. She had no alphas sent to mark her. No pack bond to warn off challengers. She was, by every measure the wolf world used, unprotected. She used that. She had always been small and overlooked. She learned to move like something that wasn't worth noticing. She traveled east, away from Darkmoor territory, deeper into the borderlands where the old packs had grown thin and the ancient forests had grown thick. Places where the trees were older than any alpha's bloodline, where the roots broke through stone and the dark was absolute between the torches. She found shelter with the Ashweld Wanderers on the 4th day. They were not a pack in the traditional sense. They were travelers, healers, traders, scholars of the old wolf ways, moving between territories with their carts and their knowledge. They had no alpha. They had a council of elders and a code of conduct and absolutely no interest in anyone else's pack politics. Their leader, a woman named Voss, stocky and silver-streaked, with the calm of someone who had survived everything, looked Seraphine over without pity. That was the first thing Seraphine liked about her. You have pack burn, Voss said, meaning the hollow-eyed look of a severed bond. How long ago? 4 days. And you're still standing. Yes. Voss had tilted her head, studying her with the careful attention of someone taking inventory. Most newly rejected wolves collapse within 3 days. The bond withdrawal is severe. I know. You didn't collapse. No. A long pause. Interesting, Voss said. And then, you can travel with us. You'll earn your place. We don't carry dead weight. I don't intend to be dead weight. She never was. She spent the next 2 years among the Ashweld Wanderers, and in that time, Seraphine learned things that Darkmoor's warriors had never dreamed of. She learned herb craft from a one-eyed elder named Dusk who knew which roots stopped bleeding and which berries slowed poison. She learned to track without sound from a young scout named Pip who moved through the forest like water. She learned old wolf history from Voss herself. The real history, the kind that wasn't taught in pack halls because it made alphas uncomfortable. The history of gifts that didn't look like gifts. Power doesn't always announce itself, Voss told her one evening, as they sat beside a low fire at the edge of an ancient ruin. Some gifts arrive quietly. Some gifts wait. Wait for what? Seraphine asked. The right pressure, Voss said. The right wound. Seraphine thought about that often. She trained her body with the same quiet intensity she applied to everything else. Not to become a fighter, she was honest with herself about her build, her speed, her limits. But to become someone who could not be easily caught, easily cornered, easily broken. She stopped being the girl who flinched when raised voices moved toward her. She started being the woman who evaluated threats before they landed. She stopped rehearsing the rejection in her mind. Kale's cold eyes, his certain voice, his perfect cruelty, and started using it as a reference point. This is what someone looks like when they have decided you have no value. Learn to recognize it early. Do not let it surprise you again. She was not healed. She was honest enough to know she was not healed. But she was functional. She was growing. She was becoming something harder and quieter and more genuinely herself than she had ever been in Darkmoor, where she had been busy trying to be acceptable. She was also, without fully understanding why, developing something strange. Her blood. It had started 4 months after she left. A subtle thing, almost unnoticeable. Cuts healed faster than they should. Not wolf fast. Faster than that. Small wounds sealed in minutes. Larger ones within an hour. The Ashweld healer noticed before she did. "Let me see your hand," Old Dusk said one afternoon. She had cut her palm on a broken crate edge. She offered her hand without thinking. Dusk stared at the wound, then stared at the wound closing. "How long has it been doing that?" the old healer asked. "I don't know. A while." "Does it hurt?" "Less than it should." Dusk was quiet for a long time. She turned Seraphine's hand over, then back, pressing gently at the rapidly healing skin. "Have you ever been to the Crimson Springs?" Dusk asked. "No. I don't know what that is." "Ancient sacred site. Deep East. The old texts say there was a line, a bloodline, connected to those springs. A bloodline the moon goddess specifically designed." A pause. "They were supposed to be the balancers, the neutralizers, the cure carriers." Seraphine looked at her hand. The cut was gone. Completely gone. "The line was thought to have died out," Dusk said softly. Seraphine met the old woman's eyes. "Apparently not," Dusk said. Seraphine did not fully understand what this meant. Not yet. Not until the messenger arrived. The messenger arrived on a night of hard rain. He was young, barely past his first shift, by the look of him, wearing the dark gray cloak of Darkmoor territory with mud up to his knees and an expression of someone who had ridden hard for a very long time. He arrived at the edge of the Ashweld camp with his hands raised, palms out, the universal gesture of a wolf requesting entry without a challenge. Voss let him in. Seraphine was at the fire when they brought him to her. She knew the cloak before she knew his face. She felt the cold move through her. Not the air's cold, the deeper kind, before he even opened his mouth. "Seraphinov," he stopped. Swallowed. Tried again. "Seraphine. Formerly of the Darkmoor pack." "Just Seraphine," she said. Her voice was even. She was proud of that. He pulled a sealed letter from his cloak. Dark wax. The Darkmoor wolf crest pressed into it. She did not reach for it immediately. She looked at it like one looks at a thing that might bite. "Who sent this?" He hesitated. "The Beta. Aldrich Vane. On behalf of the Alpha. On behalf of the Alpha. Kale." She let the name move through her mind without letting it move anything else. She had practiced that. It had taken months, but she had learned it. "What does it say?" she asked. The messenger's throat worked. "I was told to deliver it unopened, my Seraphine." She picked it up, broke the seal. "Read." The words were not Kale's. They were Aldrich's, careful and formal. But the facts were simple and brutal and utterly without softening. The Alpha is ill. A curse. Origin unknown, but confirmed by 3 separate healers. It is moving quickly. The black veins indicate a blood poison of supernatural origin. Not herb treatable, not surgically removable. He has perhaps 30 days. Perhaps less. She stopped. "Read that line again." "Perhaps 30 days." She kept reading. "Our elder healer has consulted the sacred texts. What she found, we did not expect. The only named cure for a curse of this type is the freely given blood of the one the afflicted has wronged most deeply. The text is specific. The blood must come from a place of wound, a genuine injustice, not a perceived one. The affliction responds to ancient debt. The healer identified you. We do not ask this lightly. We do not ask it with entitlement. We are asking because there is no other path. Please." She read the last word 3 times. Please. She could count on one hand the number of times an Alpha's Beta had written please to anyone. She folded the letter slowly, set it on her knee. The fire crackled. Rain fell on the canvas above. Someone across the camp laughed at something, the sound cutting through the quiet. The messenger was watching her carefully. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad," he said quietly. "He cannot stand unaided. He won't eat. The black veins reach his neck now. When they reach his jaw," he stopped. "When they reach his jaw, they'll reach his brain," she finished. He nodded. She looked at the fire. She thought about the hollow place in her chest that had once held a bond. She thought about cold gray eyes and a voice that had said you are nothing to me in front of hundreds of witnesses without a tremor of hesitation. She thought about what Voss had told her once, very quietly, in the early days when the wound was still raw and bleeding. Hate is a chain. You don't carry it around the neck of the person you hate. You carry it around your own. She thought about her blood, closing a cut in minutes. Dusk's careful eyes, the sacred texts, the bloodline designed to cure. She thought about what she would walk back into. Darkmoor Keep, the pack that had watched her humiliation in silence. Cale's inner circle, the cold stone halls that smelled of pine resin and torch smoke. And at the center of it all, dying apparently at the speed of justice, the alpha who had broken her. Did she owe him anything? No. The answer was clear and clean. No. But she thought about something else too. Something she hadn't allowed herself to think about directly, because it sat in a complicated place inside her. What does it mean if I let him die when I could save him? Not for him. For her. What does it mean for the woman she was building? The careful, deliberate, eyes-open woman she had worked 2 years to become. If the first real test of her power was to withhold it from someone dying. Power is not what you do when it costs nothing, Dusk had told her. Power is what you decide when the cost is real. The cost here was real. Unbearably real. Going back meant reopening things she had sealed. Going back meant standing in the same room as Cale. Going back meant he would need her. And she had to decide fully, consciously, with clear eyes, whether that felt like justice or like a trap. She looked up at the messenger. Tell me exactly how they found out it was my blood specifically, she said. He blinked. My lady. The healer found it in the sacred text. What text? What does it say about me? Exactly. He was quiet. I was not told the specifics. Then I need to speak to Marin. A pause. You're coming. Seraphine stood, folded the letter again, tucked it into her cloak. I'm going to ask questions, she said. Whether I give my blood at the end of them depends entirely on the answers. She turned to find Voss already standing nearby. The older woman said nothing, just looked at her with those steady, measured eyes. I'll be back, Seraphine told her. I know, Voss said. Then, quietly, like something placed rather than thrown. Whatever you decide there, make sure it's yours. Not his. Not theirs. A pause. Yours. Seraphine nodded. She walked to her tent, packed what she needed, and before first light, in the cold and the dark and the rain that hadn't stopped, she turned her face west, toward Darkmoor, toward the man who had destroyed her, toward whatever waited on the other side of her own power. She did not know yet whether she was going to save him, but she was going to make him wait to find out. At the base of the East Tower stairs, she stopped. One breath. She was not the girl who had walked out of this keep 2 years ago. She was not the girl with the hollow chest and the shaking hands who had stood beneath the winter moon and made herself a promise. She was the promise. She climbed the stairs. The chamber smelled of sickness and regret. She noticed both immediately. The wolf in her cataloging sense before her mind caught up. The sickness was unmistakable. The sharp, dark undercurrent of something supernatural eating through healthy tissue, layer by layer, the way a river undercuts a bank until the earth simply falls. The regret was harder to name, but it was there, layered into the room like smoke into fabric. She pushed the door open. He was in the bed, which was, she had to be honest, a shock. Not because she had wished him dead. She hadn't, not truly, even in the worst of the wound. But because Cale of Darkmoor was not a man anyone associated with lying down. He was motion and command and presence. The kind of person who made rooms rearrange themselves around him without asking. The man in the bed was still him. Still large. Still dark-haired. Still built like the mountain had shaped him. But the black veins, they mapped his skin from collarbone to jaw like ink spreading through water. Slow, patient, thorough. His face was ashen beneath his natural darkness. His hands, resting on the wolf pelt, were still. Too still for hands she remembered as always moving, commanding, gesturing, reaching. His eyes were closed. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. She told herself she was composing herself. That was partially true. The other part of the truth was that she was bracing for what happened next, which was this. His eyes opened. And for the first time in 2 years, Cale of Darkmoor looked at Seraphine. She had prepared for many things. For coldness. For desperation. For the particular humiliation of watching a proud man reduced to needing something from someone he had discarded. She had not prepared for what was actually in his eyes. She didn't have a word for it yet. She filed it away and stepped into the room. Seraphine. His voice was rough. damaged, even the curse eroding, even that, the smooth command weight stripped away. What was left was just a voice. Just sound. Kale, she said. She sat in the chair beside the bed. Not because she felt tenderness. Because standing over a sick man felt theatrical, and she had not come here to perform. He watched her settle. His jaw worked slightly, the way a person's jaw works when they are rehearsing and discarding words before they say them. She waited. She had learned patience. You came, he said finally. I came to decide, she said. I haven't decided yet. A beat. I understand, he said. She studied him. 2 years ago, those 2 words in that sequence would have been impossible from this man. I understand required acknowledging someone else's perspective as a thing that existed and mattered. She did not soften toward him, but she noted it, filed it, let it sit next to the other things she was collecting. Tell me about the day you rejected me, she said. His eyes went still. Seraphine, I'm not here to punish you. She kept her voice level. I'm here to understand. What I decide depends on what I understand. A pause. So talk. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father was dying, he said. 3 months before the rejection. You didn't know. I hadn't told anyone outside the inner circle. His voice was low, careful, like someone walking across ice they don't trust. He had built Darkmoor on the image of unassailable strength. An alpha's mate was part of that image. An alpha's mate is a statement. A statement about what the alpha values, she said. Yes. And you valued power. Visibly. I valued what I thought the pack needed to see me value. He stopped. I was wrong. She said nothing. Let the silence do its work. You had no visible gifts, he said. You couldn't shift completely. You had no combat record, no political lineage worth speaking of, no wolf gifts that presented themselves to me. My inner circle, he stopped. They made their position clear. They told you I was useless. Yes. And you agreed. He didn't answer immediately. I agreed that the appearance of being mated to someone without power would weaken my position during the most vulnerable transition of my alpha tenure. He paused. I told myself those were different things. Were they? Another silence. Longer this time. No, he said. She looked at the black veins spreading up the side of his throat. The moon goddess apparently had agreed. You didn't know me, she said. That's what I've come to understand over time. You didn't reject me. You rejected an idea of me. A surface version. You looked at what you could see and you decided that was all there was. I know that now. You know it because you're dying, she said. Not because you grew. He flinched. Just slightly. She felt a strange, complicated thing move through her. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not cruelty. More like the sensation of setting something down that she'd been carrying without knowing. I'm not here to forgive you, she said. That's not what this is. And I won't pretend it is. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Then what are you asking for? He held her gaze. And in his storm gray eyes, still the same color, still that impossible pale electric gray, she saw the thing she hadn't had a word for when she first walked in. She had a word for it now. Shame. Not performed shame. Not the convenient contrition of a man who needed something. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask to be forgiven because it knows it doesn't deserve to be. I'm asking for the chance to live, he said quietly, knowing that I don't deserve the asking. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood. I need to think, she said. I know. I'll give you my answer by nightfall. She walked to the door. Seraphine. She stopped. Did not turn. The gifts you didn't think you had, he said. Whatever they are, what you've become. I felt it when you walked in. She turned then. Just her head. Darkmoor territory smelled exactly the same. That was the first thing that hit her. Pine resin. Cold stone. The particular sharpness of wolf musk layered over decades of pack living. The collective scent of hundreds of bodies, hundreds of bonds, hundreds of years of hierarchy pressed into the same soil. She had hoped it would smell different. She had hoped that 2 years would have been enough to make it strange. It wasn't. It smelled like memory. And memory, she had learned, was the most treacherous terrain there was. She stopped at the treeline. The outer gates of Darkmoor Keep were visible from here. Heavy iron and ancient oak, torchlit on both sides, 2 sentries standing at rigid attention in the gray morning light. Beyond the gates, the keep itself rose in dark stone and sharper angles. The kind of structure that had been built to withstand centuries and had done exactly that. She stood at the trilene for exactly as long as it took to breathe in through her nose and out through her mouth 3 times. Then she walked forward. The sentries saw her before she reached the gate. She watched them clock her. The quick assessment, the moment of non-recognition, the shift into challenge posture. And then she watched the recognition arrive. It was almost interesting from the outside, seeing the exact moment a person's face rearranged itself around an unexpected fact. The taller sentry straightened. "Seraphine," he said. "Not a question. A recalibration." "I was summoned," she said. She did not say I was begged, though she could have. He nodded and pulled the gate open without another word. She walked through. The courtyard beyond was busy. Morning drills. She could tell from the clash of practice blades and the grunt of effort from the training ground to her left. Wolves moved past her on their way to duties. Some looked at her openly. Some pretended not to see her at all, which told her everything about where they stood. She kept her face neutral. Evaluating threats before they land, she reminded herself. Calm first. Everything else after. Aldrich met her halfway across the courtyard. The beta was perhaps 40, with a broad build and a soldier's economy of movement. She had always found him difficult to read. He was Kale's man through and through, loyal to a degree that almost constituted a personality. But he was not, she thought, cruel. Not inherently. He was simply an extension of his alpha's decisions. He had been in the hall during the rejection. He had stood there in silence like all the others. She let herself remember that for exactly 1 second. Then she set it aside. "You came," he said. He sounded, not relieved exactly, more like someone who had been holding their breath and had just been told they could stop. "I came with questions," she said. "Of course." He fell into step beside her. "Whatever you need." That was new. She noted it without letting it move her. They walked into the keep. The great hall was empty at this hour, the long stone space cold and echoing, the torch brackets throwing orange light against gray walls. She had walked this floor 100 times. She had stood at its center once and been taken apart in front of everyone who had ever mattered here. She walked across it now without breaking stride. "Marin first," she said. "Then we discuss everything else." "She's expecting you," Aldrich said. The old healer's chamber was at the far end of the east wing, a low-ceilinged room dense with hanging herbs and the smell of wood smoke. Marin was at her workbench when they entered, her silver head bent over the open sacred text. She looked up when Seraphine walked in, and did something Seraphine had not expected. She stood. Slowly, with the careful movement of great age, Marin rose from her stool and stood. Not a bow, not a formal gesture, just the act of standing for someone, acknowledging their presence as something that deserved to be met on its feet. Something moved in Seraphine's chest, something she didn't immediately have a name for. "Sit," Marin said. "Both of you." They sat. The old healer settled herself back onto her stool and placed both hands flat on the open pages of the sacred text. Her eyes, sharp and dark despite her age, moved to Seraphine's face and stayed there. "You want to know what the text says," Marin said. "Word for word," Seraphine confirmed. Marin nodded. She looked down at the page and read, translating the old script as she went. The ancient language the Pack scholars used, older than Darkmoor itself, older than most bloodlines. When an alpha takes a bond by divine designation and severs it by pride alone, not protection, not necessity, not the good of the many, the moon goddess marks the debt. The mark becomes a curse when the wound is deep enough. The curse spreads from the point of greatest pride, the heart, outward through the blood. It cannot be removed by force or skill or prayer. It can only be dissolved by the blood of the one who was wronged. Marin paused. "But the blood must be freely given," she continued. "It cannot be taken. It cannot be tricked. If given under coercion, it will accelerate the curse rather than cure it. The power lives in the choice." Silence. Seraphine let that sit inside her for a moment. The power lives in the choice. "And you're certain," Seraphine said, "that I'm the one identified in the text." "The text does not name you," Marin said carefully. "It describes the conditions. And the conditions match you and no one else. The bond was divine. I tested that myself before the rejection was made. Kale knew it was real. He rejected it anyway." A pause. For pride. For image. For the appearance of strength. She closed the book gently. The moon goddess does not forgive that quickly. Seraphine was quiet. "How much blood?" she asked. Marin met her eyes. A palmful. Maybe less. Your blood is. It has properties I've never encountered before. Even a small amount should be sufficient. And it won't harm me? No. Marin's voice was absolutely certain. The bloodline you carry was designed to give. It will replenish. It always has. Seraphine looked at her hands in her lap. Her plain, unremarkable hands that had been called useless. That sealed cuts in minutes. That the old texts apparently had an opinion about. Where is he? She asked. A long pause. He has been asking about you, Aldrich said carefully. Since I sent the letter. Where is he? She kept her voice even. His chamber. East Tower. She stood. I'll speak to him alone, she said. Aldrich opened his mouth. Closed it. Nodded. She walked back into the corridor. The chambers smelled of sickness and regret. She noticed both immediately. The wolf in her cataloging sense before her mind caught up. The sickness was unmistakable. The sharp, dark undercurrent of something supernatural eating through healthy tissue, layer by layer, the way a river undercuts a bank until the earth simply falls. The regret was harder to name, but it was there, layered into the room like smoke into fabric. She pushed the door open. He was in the bed, which was, she had to be honest, a shock. Not because she had wished him dead. She hadn't, not truly, even in the worst of the wound. But because Caleb Darkmoor was not a man anyone associated with lying down. He was motion and command and presence. The kind of person who made rooms rearrange themselves around him without asking. The man in the bed was still him. Still large. Still dark-haired. Still built like the mountain had shaped him. But the black veins. They mapped his skin from collarbone to jaw like ink spreading through water. Slow, patient, thorough. His face was ashen beneath his natural darkness. His hands, resting on the wolf pelt, were still. Too still for hands she remembered as always moving, commanding, gesturing, reaching. His eyes were closed. She stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. She told herself she was composing herself. That was partially true. The other part of the truth was that she was bracing for what happened next, which was this. His eyes opened. And for the first time in 2 years, Caleb Darkmoor looked at Seraphine. She had prepared for many things. For coldness. For desperation. For the particular humiliation of watching a proud man reduced to needing something from someone he had discarded. She had not prepared for what was actually in his eyes. She didn't have a word for it yet. She filed it away and stepped into the room. Seraphine. His voice was rough. Damaged, even the curse eroding, even that the smooth command weight stripped away. What was left was just a voice. Just sound. Cale, she said. She sat in the chair beside the bed. Not because she felt tenderness. Because standing over a sick man felt theatrical. And she had not come here to perform. He watched her settle. His jaw worked slightly. The way a person's jaw works when they are rehearsing and discarding words before they say them. She waited. She had learned patience. You came, he said finally. I came to decide, she said. I haven't decided yet. A beat. I understand, he said. She studied him. 2 years ago, those 2 words in that sequence would have been impossible from this man. I understand required acknowledging someone else's perspective as a thing that existed and mattered. She did not soften toward him, but she noted it, filed it, let it sit next to the other things she was collecting. Tell me about the day you rejected me, she said. His eyes went still. Seraphine, I'm not here to punish you. She kept her voice level. I'm here to understand. What I decide depends on what I understand. A pause. So talk. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father was dying, he said. 3 months before the rejection. You didn't know. I hadn't told anyone outside the inner circle. His voice was low, careful, like someone walking across ice they don't trust. He had built Darkmoor on the image of unassailable strength. An alpha's mate was part of that image. An alpha's mate is a statement. A statement about what the alpha values, she said. Yes. And you valued power. Visibly. I valued what I thought the pack needed to see me value. He stopped. I was wrong. She said nothing. Let the silence do its work. You had no visible gifts, he said. You couldn't shift completely. You had no combat record, no political lineage worth speaking of, no wolf gifts that presented themselves to me. My inner circle, he stopped. They made their position clear. They told you I was useless. Yes. And you agreed. He didn't answer immediately. I agreed that the appearance of being mated to someone without power would weaken my position during the most vulnerable transition of my alpha tenure. He paused. I told myself those were different things. Were they? Another silence. Longer this time. No, he said. She looked at the black veins spreading up the side of his throat. The moon goddess apparently had agreed. You didn't know me, she said. That's what I've come to understand over time. You didn't reject me. You rejected an idea of me. A surface version. You looked at what you could see and you decided that was all there was. I know that now. You know it because you're dying, she said. Not because you grew. He flinched. Just slightly. She felt a strange, complicated thing move through her. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not cruelty. More like the sensation of setting something down that she'd been carrying without knowing. I'm not here to forgive you, she said. That's not what this is. And I won't pretend it is. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Then what are you asking for? He held her gaze. And in his storm gray eyes, still the same color, still that impossible pale electric gray, she saw the thing she hadn't had a word for when she first walked in. She had a word for it now. Shame. Not performed shame. Not the convenient contrition of a man who needed something. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask to be forgiven because it knows it doesn't deserve to be. I'm asking for the chance to live, he said quietly, knowing that I don't deserve the asking. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood. I need to think, she said. I know. I'll give you my answer by nightfall. She walked to the door. Seraphine. She stopped. Did not turn. The gifts you didn't think you had, he said. Whatever they are. What you've become. I felt it when you walked in. She turned then. Just her head. What did you feel? She asked. He met her eyes. Power, he said simply. The kind that doesn't announce itself. She almost let something show in her face. She didn't. She walked out. And she stood in the cold stone corridor outside his chamber with her back against the wall, and her hand pressed to her chest where the hollow place still lived, smaller now, much smaller, but still there, and she let herself feel the full weight of what she was holding. His life. In her hands. In her blood. And the question, the real question, the one that had been waiting since the messenger arrived, was not whether she could save him. It was whether saving him would cost her the self she had built. Or whether it was finally, unexpectedly, on her own terms, the moment that self was fully completed. She pressed her hand harder against her chest, and she made herself feel the answer. She did not go back to Cale's chamber immediately. She went to the one place in Darkmoor Keep she had always been able to think, the east parapet, a narrow stone walkway above the keep's outer wall, open to the sky, exposed to the wind off the mountain. She had found it in the early days of her time here, before the rejection, when she had still been trying to fit herself into Darkmoor's shape. And she had come here whenever the keep felt too tight, too loud, too full of people watching her and finding her wanting. She went there now. The wind hit her like a hand, hard and cold and without apology. She gripped the stone railing. Below her, the courtyard, the training ground, the pack going about its life with the determined normalcy of people trying not to think about their alpha dying above them. She could see the strain in it from here, in the too rigid posture of the warriors, the too quick movements of the servants, the way every person moved like someone performing calmness they did not feel. A pack without a secure alpha was a wound waiting to open. She knew that. She had grown up understanding pack dynamics in the abstract, and the Ashweld Wanderers had taught her the specifics. Without the alpha bond holding the pack's collective wolf sense steady, the more dominant members would begin to feel the instinct to fill the void. Challenges would come. The pack would fracture. In the worst cases, they would dissolve, scatter into the forest as unmated, unaffiliated wolves. Vulnerable, dangerous, lost, hundreds of lives. The pack had watched her humiliation without intervention, but they were not responsible for their alpha's choice. She let that truth sit beside the other truths she was holding. She thought about what Marin had read. The power lives in the choice, not in the blood itself, in the choosing. That was, she turned this over carefully. That was interesting, because it meant that the cure was not simply a physical substance. The cure was her agency. The moon goddess, it seemed, was not asking her to sacrifice herself. She was asking her to choose, to make a conscious, autonomous, self-determined decision. The opposite of what had been done to her, which was having her choice removed entirely, publicly, irreversibly, by someone who believed he had the right. I reject you. She had not chosen that. She had not chosen to be bonded in the first place. She had not chosen to be rejected. She had not chosen to be called useless in front of hundreds. She had chosen to leave. She had chosen to survive. She had chosen every step of the 2 years that followed. And now she was being asked to make one more choice. The biggest one. She thought about what choosing no would mean. He would die. The pack would fracture. She would walk away again, with her power intact, her decision unmade. She would go back to the Ashweld Wanderers and Voss's steady eyes and Dusk's herb charts and the slow, safe work of becoming herself at a distance from anything that could hurt her. She thought about what that version of herself would look like in 10 years. Safe, distant, whole in some ways, incomplete in others. And she thought about what choosing yes would mean. He would live. The pack would hold. She would have walked back into the place that broke her and walked out again on her own terms. Not because she was forced, not because she was desperate, but because she decided. She would know, in the way only the truly tested know, that her power was not contingent on his weakness. That she was not defined by what he had done to her. That the wound could be part of her story without being the end of it. She gripped the stone railing harder. There was a third thing. A thing she had not let herself look at directly, because it was uncomfortable and inconvenient and complicated. When she had walked into that chamber and looked at Cale, dying, stripped of everything that had made him the image of untouchable power, she had felt something she did not want to feel. Not love. She was careful to be honest about that. Not love, but recognition. The remnant of the bond, even severed, even 2 years scarred, had recognized him. The wolf part of her, the deep instinctual part that didn't care about pride or rejection or dignity, had recognized its other half and responded. Like a chord resolving. Painful and involuntary and absolutely real. She hated that. She let herself hate it for exactly 30 seconds. Then she let it go. Because it was data, not a directive. The bond recognized him. She, the woman she had built, would make her own decision. She heard footsteps on the parapet behind her. She did not turn immediately. The footsteps were careful. Slow. Deliberate. The kind that announced themselves intentionally, not wanting to startle. She turned. It was Cale. He had left his bed. He was upright barely. One hand on the wall, the other hanging at his side. He was wearing a loose linen shirt, the collar open, and the black veins were visible all the way up his throat in the pale daylight. His face was gray with effort. "You shouldn't be up," she said. "I know," he said. He took 2 more steps along the parapet toward her, and then stopped, keeping distance, she noticed. More distance than he needed to. As though proximity was something he was choosing not to assume. She noted that too. "I didn't come to persuade you," he said. His breathing was heavier than it should have been. Even that short walk had cost him. "I came because..." He stopped, steadied himself. "I needed to tell you something. Before you decide. Something that isn't about what I need from you." She waited. "I had a report," he said, "for months after you left. One of the Ashweld Wanderers passed through our territory's edge and mentioned a woman traveling with them. Described her." He paused. "I knew who it was." She watched him. "I had the report for 2 weeks," he said. "I read it every day. I told myself I was keeping track of a former pack member's location for safety purposes." He exhaled. "That was a lie I was telling myself. What was the truth?" "I missed you." He said it simply, without performance. The way a man says something he has been arguing with for a long time. "I missed someone I had convinced myself I didn't want. And instead of doing anything about it, I filed the report and pretended I hadn't read it 12 times. The wind moved between them. She felt something in her chest shift. Not the hollow place filling. Something adjacent to it. Something that said, "He is telling the truth right now. Whatever else is complicated, this part is true." "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because you deserve to make your choice knowing everything," he said. "Not just the version where I'm the dying alpha who needs your blood." He met her eyes across the parapet. "You deserve to know that I knew I was wrong before the curse. I just wasn't brave enough to do anything about it." "And the curse made you brave?" "The curse made me honest," he said. "Bravery might take longer." She looked at him for a long moment. The dying alpha. The proud man. The one who had named her useless. The one who had read a report 12 times and told himself it was protocol. She took a breath. "Go back to your chamber," she said. His face didn't fall. He didn't argue. He simply nodded. Started to turn. Kale. He stopped. She held his gaze. I'll give you my answer at nightfall, she said. As I said. But. A pause. She made herself say the next part cleanly, without hedging. I want something from you in return. Not for my blood. For my presence here. For the fact that I came at all. He waited. When this is over, she said, however it ends, I want a formal declaration. In the great hall. Before the whole pack. She let the weight of it sit between them. I want you to tell them the truth. What you believed about me. What the truth was. And what your rejection cost you. Not for her pride. She was clear about that in her own heart. For every wolf who had stood in that hall and learned, from their alpha, that powerlessness was the same as worthlessness. For every person who would come after her and be measured by a standard that had been built on a lie. He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said. Just that. No conditions. No negotiation. Yes. She nodded once. He turned and walked back the way he had come. Slowly, carefully, one hand trailing the wall. She turned back to the mountain. The wind hit her face. She closed her eyes. And she made her choice. Nightfall came the way it always did in Darkmoor. Suddenly. One moment the sky above the mountain was bruised purple and amber. The next it was black, absolute, ancient, pricked through with stars that looked close enough to touch. The torches along the keep's walls ignited one by one, their orange light catching the stone and throwing long shadows across the courtyard below. Seraphine watched it happen from the parapet. Then she went inside. Marin was waiting in the healer's chamber. Aldrich, too, standing near the door with his hands clasped and his expression carefully neutral, which she had come to understand was his version of anxious. She looked at the old healer. How do we do this? She asked. Marin gestured to the chair beside her workbench. Seraphine sat. The workbench held a clay bowl. Ancient, the kind of vessel that had been used for sacred rituals long before Darkmoor had walls. It was engraved along the rim with wolf script. Old symbols. The kind that didn't translate into modern pack language cleanly, but carried meaning the way old things carry meaning. In weight rather than words. Beside the bowl, a small ritual blade. Iron. Short. The handle wrapped in dark leather. Your palm, Marin said. Over the bowl. The blood falls freely. You don't press, you don't squeeze. It gives itself. She paused. That matters. The text was specific. The blood must be offered. Not extracted. And then, the bowl is brought to Kale. He drinks. Something moved through Seraphine's expression that she didn't entirely suppress. Marin noticed. I know, the old healer said quietly. It is an intimate act. It is designed to be. A pause. The bond doesn't fully break, even severed. What you're doing reaches into that space, the place where the bond lived. It speaks to the curse there, at its source. It speaks to the moon goddess's debt, Seraphine said. Yes. She looked at the blade. The choice has to be witnessed, Marin said. For the ritual to hold. The sacred text requires 2 witnesses who are not of the Alpha's blood. Then you and Aldrich, Seraphine said. Aldrich straightened slightly. It would be an honor, he said. His voice had an edge of something, not sentiment exactly. More like someone acknowledging a weight they hadn't known they were carrying. She glanced at him. You feel guilty, she said. Not an accusation. Just observation. He held her gaze. I stood in that hall, he said. And I said nothing. You were his beta. I was also a witness to something wrong. His jaw tightened. Being his beta doesn't make the wrong into a right. It just made me complicit in it. He stopped. I am sorry for that. Genuinely. She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. Just once. It was not forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. And sometimes acknowledgement was what a person actually needed. She turned back to the bowl. Picked up the blade. It was lighter than she expected. She held her palm over the clay, steadied her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the rhythm she had learned in the Ashweld camp when Voss had taught her to enter difficult moments centered rather than braced, and drew the blade across her palm in one clean motion. The cut was sharp and immediate. The blood came. Dark. Darker than she expected. Not the bright red of a surface wound. This was something deeper in tone, richer, almost luminescent in the torch light. It fell into the bowl in slow, deliberate drops, each one catching the light as it fell and throwing it back differently. Even Marin went still. Goddess, Aldrich said softly. Not an oath. A prayer. The blood, even in the clay bowl, was doing something. A faint glow. Not dramatic. Not blazing. The subtle, certain light of an ember in a dark room. The kind of light that is easy to miss if you're not paying attention. The kind that, once noticed, you can't look away from. How much? Seraphine asked. Her voice was steady. That is enough, Maren said. Her voice was reverent in a way it hadn't been before. The old healer reached out and placed her weathered fingers gently over Seraphine's cut palm. The wound sealed itself in seconds. That particular quality of her blood, the gift she had spent 2 years barely understanding. Maren looked at the closed wound, then up at Seraphine. The text called the bloodline the cure carriers, Maren said quietly. I thought that was metaphor. Old language for someone with skill or knowledge. She shook her head. It is not metaphor. No, Seraphine said. She looked at the bowl. The faint luminescence was holding. Patient, steady, unhurried. Take it to him, she said. They walked to Cale's chamber together. Maren carried the bowl with both hands, the way one carries something sacred. Seraphine walked beside her. Aldrich followed. The corridor was empty. She had asked for that, for the keep to be cleared of this wing during the ritual. Not for privacy, for control. She did not want an audience for this part. The Great Hall Declaration could be public. This moment was something else. This moment was between the wound and the cure. She pushed the chamber door open. Cale was in the bed. He had made it back from the parapet, but the effort had cost him. His face was grayer than before, and the black veins along his jaw had crept another finger's width toward his temple. His eyes opened when the door opened, moving immediately to her face. Not to the bowl. To her. You decided, he said. I decided, she said. Something moved across his face, relief and something more complicated. Something that didn't have a clean name. Maren set the bowl on the low table beside his bed. Seraphine pulled the chair close. Sat down. She looked at the bowl between them. The dark, faintly glowing blood. And she felt the full strangeness of the moment settle over her. She was giving something of herself to the man who had taken something from her. Not because she had to. Because she had chosen to. On her terms. With her conditions. In full knowledge of what it meant and what it didn't. She looked at him. This doesn't change what happened, she said. I know. It doesn't mean I forgive you. I know. But it means, she paused. Let herself find the right words because they mattered. It means I refuse to let what you did be the thing that defines what I do. I am not the rejection. I am not the wound. I am the choice I make right now. He held her gaze. That is the most extraordinary thing anyone has ever said to me, he said quietly. Drink, she said. He reached for the bowl. His hands, those 2 still hands she had noticed when she first walked in, were trembling now. Not with fear, with the exertion of illness that had gone on too long. She did not help him lift it. That would not have been the right thing. He lifted it himself. Drank. She watched his throat move. Watched the moment the blood reached him. It was not subtle. The reaction was immediate. She could see it move through him like a wave moves through water. Not violent, but total. His body went rigid for 3 seconds, every muscle locking, his back arching slightly from the pillow. The black veins, all of them, all the way from his chest to his jaw, flared dark for one terrible instant. She leaned forward. Then they began to fade. Slowly. The way frost retreats when the sun finds it. Starting at the outermost edges and pulling back toward the center. The unnatural darkness retreating through his skin. The horrible ink map of the curse receding inch by inch. Leaving nothing behind but clear skin and the shallow marks of someone who had been very ill for a very long time. Cale exhaled. The sound he made was not a sound she had words for. It was the sound of a man returning to himself. His eyes closed. His breathing deepened, slowly, steadily, finding a rhythm that hadn't been there before. Maren moved to his other side, checking his pulse, his temperature, the rate of the veins' retreat. It's working, she said. The 2 words held a lifetime of relief. Seraphine sat back. She pressed her healed palm against her knee. And she let herself breathe. She had done it. The choice was made. She had given what only she could give, and she had given it as herself. Not as the rejected girl, not as the scarred survivor, but as the woman who had decided that her power did not exist in opposition to his weakness. It existed independently. It always had. She stood to go. And that was when the chamber door burst open. The man in the doorway was not a servant. He was a warrior, senior, by his build and bearing. She recognized him from the old days. Corin, one of Kale's inner circle. The group that had 2 years ago advised their alpha that a certain mated she-wolf was an unacceptable liability. He was looking at the bowl, at the faint residue of luminescent blood still coating the clay. At Kale, breathing easier, the black veins nearly gone, his color slowly returning. And his face was wrong. Not relieved. Not grateful. Wrong. You gave it to him, Corin said. His voice was, she categorized it quickly, too flat. Controlled in the particular way that people control themselves when they are suppressing a strong emotion that isn't the one they're pretending to have. Who let you in? Aldrich said, stepping forward. His voice had gone sharp and quiet, beta sharp. The tone of a man sliding from courtesy into authority without ceremony. I was told the ritual was complete. I came to check on. You were told no visitors until morning, Aldrich said. I gave that order myself. Corin's eyes moved to Aldrich, then back to Seraphine. She was watching him carefully. His scent had shifted the moment he walked in. Adrenaline, overlaid with something colder. The particular chemical signature of a plan disrupted. He came here to stop this, she realized. The thought arrived fully formed, like something she had been building toward without knowing it. He wanted Kale to die. She kept her face neutral, kept her body still. Why? Power vacuum. She answered her own question the same moment she asked it. If Kale died without an heir, without a designated successor, the pack hierarchy would collapse into a challenge sequence. The strongest senior warrior would take it, the one with the most established position inside the inner circle. Corin had been building that position for years. She could see it now, the whole architecture of it, assembled in the 3 seconds since he'd walked through the door. His presence during the rejection. His voice in Kale's ear about image and strength and uselessness. His investment in the idea that Kale needed a powerful mate. Meaning, a mate that Corin could influence or control or neutralize. She had not been rejected because she was weak. She had been rejected because Corin had needed her gone. She felt something move through her chest. Hot and clarifying. The specific sensation of a truth landing after a long time in the dark. Aldrich, she said. Her voice was even. Careful. Deliberate. Yes, Aldrich said. He was still watching Corin. When was the last time Corin called a senior warrior's meeting without Kale's authorization? A pause. Twice, Aldrich said slowly. In the last month. While Kale was declining. Yes. And who was present? Another pause. Longer this time. She watched Aldrich's face change as the same architecture assembled itself in his mind. Corin's hand moved to the short sword at his hip. Not drawing it. Just touching it. The gesture of a man reminding himself he had options. Don't, she said. The word came out quiet. Absolute. The room stilled around it. Corin looked at her. And for the first time, she saw through the flat control to what was underneath. He was afraid of her. Not of Aldrich. Not of whatever consequences the beta could name. Of her. Of what she had just done. Because what she had just done had made her the most important person in this keep. The woman whose blood had cured the alpha. The woman named by the sacred text. The woman the moon goddess had specifically, deliberately, unambiguously chosen. Corin had built his plan around the assumption that she was nothing. And she had just walked into his plan and dismantled it by being exactly what she was. You advised him to reject me, she said. It wasn't a question. Corin said nothing. You told him I was useless, she said. You told him I would weaken him. You made the case over and over until he believed it. A pause. And then you waited for the curse to do what you needed it to do. I don't know what you. Yes, you do, she said. The room was absolutely still. From the bed, Kale's breathing had changed. He was awake. Not deeply. Not recovered enough for that. But awake in the way the badly ill become awake when danger enters the room. His eyes were open, heavy but alert, tracking between Corin and Seraphine with a focus that hadn't been there an hour ago. The blood was already working. Aldrich, Kale said. His voice was rough, stripped, barely half what it normally was. But it was there. My alpha, Aldrich said immediately. Remove him from the room. A pause, each word costing effort. And post guards. No one in or out without. He stopped, breathed. Without her authorization. Her. Seraphine. The room heard it. Corin heard it. She watched his face process the sentence, the implications of it, and watched what was left of his composure crack. My alpha, Corin said, his voice shifting into something that walked the edge between deference and threat. You are not yet recovered. Your judgment may be. My judgment, Cale said, and even diminished, even rough-voiced, something in his tone stopped Corin like a hand on his chest, is my own. It has always been my own. A pause that seemed to cost him. The question is whether I used it. He looked at Seraphine. Just for a moment. I didn't, that look said. But I should have. And I know it now. Aldrich crossed to Corin. Put a hand on his arm. Corin looked at the hand. Looked at the room. Looked at the bowl with its residue of luminescent blood, and the alpha breathing steadily in the bed, and the woman sitting beside him who had just dismantled everything he'd been building. He let himself be let out. The door closed. Silence. Marin exhaled, a long, shaking sound, the breath of someone who had been very frightened and was only now allowing themselves to feel it. Aldrich came back in. His face was, for the first time since she'd arrived, something other than carefully neutral. Something raw. The reports he was compiling, Aldrich said. His voice was low and tight. The inner circle meetings. I knew something was wrong. I told myself it was grief. Anxiety about the Alpha's illness. He stopped. I should have looked closer. You're looking now, Seraphine said. It was not absolution, but it was direction. She turned back to the bed. Cale's eyes were on her. Still heavy. Still fighting exhaustion. But clear, in the way eyes become clear when the thing that had been clouding them has been named and addressed. He was behind it, Cale said. Not surprised. Confirming something he was following in real time. I believe so. Aldrich can verify. There will be evidence. There always is when someone has been building something. Cale's jaw tightened. 2 years, he said. Yes. He stopped. Something moved across his face that she couldn't name immediately. He made the case for rejecting you. Persistently. Over months. His eyes closed briefly. I thought it was counsel. I thought he was advising me. He was positioning himself, she said. He opened his eyes. I should have questioned it, he said. I should have thought. Why is this man so invested in removing my fated mate? Why does this matter so much to him? His voice roughened. I didn't ask those questions because I wanted an excuse. She looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, he stopped. The rawness of illness had stripped away whatever he normally used to manage what came out of him, and what was left was unvarnished in a way she suspected he was unused to. I was afraid of you. From the beginning. From the moment I felt the bond. She went still. Afraid, she said carefully. Of me. Of what it meant. To be that bound to someone. To need someone that completely. He exhaled. My father raised me to believe that need was weakness. That dependence, on anyone, made an alpha vulnerable. A pause. So when Corin started making the case, I let him. Because some part of me was looking for a reason to run. The silence after that was heavy. Textured. The kind of silence that holds more than one feeling at once. She looked at him. At the man stripped of every armor the illness had taken, which was apparently all of them. And she felt the complicated truth of him land in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever, in the way forgiveness was usually meant. But something. Something that said, this is the real shape of the thing I was rejected by. Not cold certainty. Fear wearing a mask. She was not sure that made it better. She was not sure it made it worse. It made it human. And human things were complicated. Rest, she said. Seraphine. You need rest, she said. You've just had a curse lifted and a confrontation. Your body needs to rebuild. She stood. Tomorrow you'll be stronger. Tomorrow we can talk about everything that comes next. Will you still be here tomorrow? He asked. She looked at him. That depends, she said, on how you handle tomorrow. She picked up her cloak from the chair back. You made me a promise on the parapet, she said. The Great Hall. The full truth before the pack. I remember. I'll be there for that, she said. After that, she paused. Let it remain open. We'll see. She walked to the door. Seraphine. She stopped. Thank you, he said. Not the desperate, drowning gratitude of someone who has just been saved from death. The other kind. The quieter, more costly kind. The kind that knows it doesn't cover the debt. The kind that offers itself anyway. She left without answering. She walked back to the east wing. Found a room. A guest room, cold and simply furnished, far enough from everything to give her quiet. She sat on the edge of the bed. She pressed both hands against her knees. And she let herself feel the full weight of the day. The gift she had given. the enemy she had identified. The truth she had been told about fear and fathers and a man who had run from her because wanting her had frightened him. She let all of it exist simultaneously, without resolving it into something neater than it was. Then she lay down, and she listened to the keep around her, its old sounds, its familiar sounds, and she waited for morning. Morning arrived gray and cold. A frost had come overnight, the first real one of the season, and it coated the stone of the keep's outer walls in a thin, bright skin of white that caught the early light and threw it back softly. She was awake before dawn. She had slept, which surprised her, deeply without dreams, as though her body, or something larger than her body, had recognized that she had set something down, had released her into rest because the carrying was temporarily finished. She dressed in the pre-dawn quiet. Her own clothes, the Ashweld kind, simple and warm and entirely hers. Not Darkmoor's colors. Not their cut. Hers. She went to the window and looked out at the frost-bright courtyard. Then she went to find Aldrich. He was already up. He had, she discovered, been up all night. He met her in the corridor outside his own chamber with the particular look of a man who has spent the hours between midnight and dawn doing something difficult and necessary, and is now carrying the weight of what he found. "Corin," he said. "What did you find?" "Letters," he said. "Hidden in his quarters. Under the floor, behind the hearthstone. A full correspondence with 3 senior warriors. The plan was comprehensive." He stopped. "The curse. He didn't cause it. That came from the moon goddess, we're certain of that. But he knew about it before he told Kale. He sat on the information for 2 weeks, letting it advance." She felt cold. He knew a cure existed? He knew the sacred text mentioned one. He chose not to consult it. Aldrich's voice was controlled. Very controlled. He assumed the cure was theoretical. That even if it mentioned a name, the named person would be too far away, or too unwilling. "He didn't know about my blood specifically." "No. He couldn't have. That isn't in any text he would have had access to." A pause. "He simply counted on your unwillingness." She breathed through the cold that had settled in her chest. "He counted on you hating Kale enough to let him die," Aldrich said. She looked at the wall. "He nearly counted right," she said. Aldrich said nothing. "What will Kale do?" she asked. "He has been informed." Aldrich straightened. "He was informed first thing this morning." "He is." A pause. "He is not the man he was yesterday. Whatever happened last night, whatever it is that your blood has done, he is significantly recovered. Physically. And otherwise." He paused. "He wanted to come and tell you himself, but I advised against it. I thought you should hear it from me first. Have a chance to decide how you want to handle it." She looked at Aldrich, recalibrating him slightly. She was discovering a more careful person than she had given him credit for. "Corin will be dealt with formally," Aldrich continued. "Under pack law. His rank is stripped. He and the 3 warriors who were in correspondence with him will face the pack tribunal." A pause. "The pack will be told. All of it." "When?" "Kale has called a full pack gathering. The Great Hall." He held her gaze. "This morning." She was quiet. "He's not waiting," she said. "No." A pause. He said, and I'm repeating his words exactly because he asked me to. He said he has waited too long already. He said he does not want to spend any more time as a man who owes a debt he hasn't publicly acknowledged. Something moved through her chest. Slow and complicated and warm-edged. She did not examine it immediately. "Give me an hour," she said. "The gathering is in 2 hours," Aldrich said. "Then I have an hour." She spent it in the healer's chamber with Marin. Not for medical reasons. For clarity. The old healer made tea, the strong, bitter Ashweld kind, which told Seraphine that Marin had more connections to the Wanderers than she had let on. And they sat across from each other in the herb-scented quiet, and Seraphine asked the questions she needed answered. "The bloodline," she said. "What does it mean for my future? Is it permanent? Does it diminish? Can it be used again?" "It doesn't diminish," Marin said. "The sacred text is clear on that. Cure carrier bloodlines are renewable. They replenish because they were designed to be used, not hoarded." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "As for what it means for your future, that is not for a healer to say. Then say it as something else." Marin looked at her with those sharp, dark eyes. "It means," she said carefully, "that the moon goddess has demonstrated, publicly, unmistakably, and in front of her own sacred text, what she thought of the rejection." She paused. It means you have power that is recognized at the highest level. The level of divine design. Another pause. What that means politically, socially, in terms of your standing. That depends on what you claim. Claim, Seraphine repeated. You came here as a visitor, Marin said. You can leave as one. Or, she stopped. Or, Seraphine pressed. Or you can stand in that great hall in 2 hours and be seen, Marin said simply. Fully. As you are. And let what is yours be named. Seraphine looked at her tea. It isn't about Kale, she said. She said it to be sure. To hear it out loud. No, Marin agreed. It was never about Kale. A pause. It is about who you are and whether you are willing to claim it in front of the people who once watched you be dismissed. The Great Hall. The ring of watching faces. The same stone floor. The same torch brackets throwing orange light against gray walls. Different persons standing at its center. She lifted her cup. Drank. Set it down. Thank you, she said to Marin. Thank yourself, the old healer said. I just made the tea. The great hall was full. She had expected that. She had not expected the particular quality of the silence that fell when she walked in. She entered from the east corridor, not the main doors, which would have been theatrical, and she moved to a place along the side wall, slightly apart from the gathered pack, as the hall filled around her. She watched them come in. Warriors. Elders. She-wolves. Young wolves barely past their first shift. Pack members she recognized and pack members she didn't. Hundreds of them. The same hall. The same ring. But this time she was not at the center. This time Kale was. He stood on the raised stone step at the far end of the hall. The Alpha's position, the place from which Darkmoor's leaders had always addressed their pack. He was upright, fully dressed. The black veins were gone entirely. His skin was clear, his color restored, his bearing back in something close to its original shape. He looked like himself. He looked different from himself. Both simultaneously. He scanned the room as people entered. Found her. Did not hold the look too long. Turned back to the gathering. She appreciated that. When the hall was full and the doors were closed, Aldrich stepped forward. Darkmoor Pack, he said, and his voice carried to every corner with the practiced ease of a man who had done this many times. Your Alpha speaks. Kale stepped forward. He let the silence sit for a moment. She had watched him command rooms before. She had watched him use silence as an instrument, making it work for him, making people lean in. She recognized the technique. This time it felt different. She thought, watching him, that maybe the silence this time was not for effect. Maybe it was because he was gathering himself. Maybe it cost something. 3 days ago, he began. I was dying. The hall was absolutely still. A curse, placed by the moon goddess herself in response to an act of pride. He paused. An act I committed. 2 years ago. In this hall. She watched the pack absorb that. Watched the faces shift. Surprise, confusion, recognition. Something that might have been shame. I stood in this hall, Kale said, and I rejected my fated mate. Before all of you. His voice was level. Steady. But not cold. The coldness was gone. What was there instead was the particular tone of someone who has decided to be honest and has committed to the cost of it. I told her she was useless, that she had no value, that she would weaken me. The hall held its breath. I was wrong. 2 words. Simple. Direct. No softening. No qualifications. I was wrong in my assessment. I was wrong in my certainty. And I was wrong in my willingness to say those words in public, to make her humiliation a performance for this pack. He paused. What I said to her was untrue. What I taught you, by saying it in front of you, was dangerous. Because I am your Alpha, and what I demonstrate you learn. And what you learn from me becomes the shape of this pack. She felt something move through the room. Not sound. A shift. The physical sensation of many people reconsidering something at the same time. The mate I rejected, he continued, has gifts this pack has never seen. Her bloodline is written in the sacred texts as the cure carriers. Divine design, the moon goddess's own making. When my body was failing and no skill, no herb, no prayer could reach it, her blood cured me. He let that land. The woman I called useless saved my life. Silence. Pure silence. She had wondered how this would feel. Standing at the side of this hall, while the man who had publicly destroyed her publicly corrected it. She had wondered if it would feel like revenge. It didn't. It felt like, she searched for the word, release. Not because his words gave her value. She had value. She had always had value. She knew that now in her bones. Because his words corrected the lie. And the lie had been out there for 2 years, in the minds of everyone in this room, shaping how they understood her, what they believed about power and worth, and the way gifts announced themselves. The lie was being corrected now. That mattered. Not for her. For every person in this room. I have more to tell you, Cale said. He began speaking about Corin. She watched the room as he spoke. Watched the shock move through the pack like a wave through still water. Watched the warriors' faces change. Confusion, then anger, then the particular cold fury of people who understand they have been maneuvered. Corin was brought in by 2 guards. She watched the hall look at him. And she watched him look at her. The fear was still there. She met his eyes without expression. She was not angry. Anger would have required him to still matter. He had built a plan around her being nothing. She was standing in the hall of the pack that had dismissed her, beside the sacred text that named her, inside a body that had just cured the uncurable. And he had built a plan around her being nothing. She felt, quietly, without performance, profoundly sorry for him. Not in a soft way. In the cold, clear way one feels sorry for someone who has made a fatal miscalculation. He had looked at her and seen nothing. And in doing so, he had ensured his own undoing. The tribunal would handle the rest. Aldrich stepped forward to announce the formal proceedings. And in the moment before the hall erupted back into noise and movement, in the breath between the alpha's speech ending and the pack responding, Cale found her eyes again. Across the crowded room. Through the bodies and the torchlight and the 2 years and the wound and the cure and everything that had happened and everything that hadn't. He found her eyes. And he didn't look away. Neither did she. She let herself feel the full weight of what was sitting in his gaze. Then she turned, and she walked back into the corridor. And she stood there in the cold stone quiet, with her back against the wall and her hand pressed to her chest. Over the hollow place that was not, she realized with quiet surprise, quite as hollow as it had been yesterday. Not filled. Not healed. But different. Changed. The shape of a wound when it begins, slowly, honestly, on its own terms, to close. She did not go to him that night. She had half expected him to come to her. He didn't. She lay in the guest room in the east wing and listened to the keep settle around her. The old sounds, the creak of stone cooling in the night air, the distant murmur of guards changing rotation, the low howl of wind through the mountain pass. And she thought about what the next step looked like. She was not, she realized, afraid of it. That was new. 2 years ago, the idea of standing in uncertain ground with Cale of Darkmoor would have made her stomach close like a fist. She had spent the early months of their arrangement walking on surfaces she couldn't trust, trying to read him, trying to be enough, trying to understand the rules of a game she hadn't been told she was playing. She was not that person now. She was someone who knew the ground under her own feet, who had tested it, built it, lived on it. The question of Cale was separate from the question of herself. She was clear on that. In the morning, she went to the training ground. Not because she had been invited. Because she needed to move, the Ashweld habit of starting the day with the body before the mind. And the training ground was the logical place for it. She expected it to be empty at this hour. It wasn't. 3 young she-wolves were working through a paired defense sequence in the far corner. Young enough to be uncertain in their movements. Old enough to be pushing through the uncertainty rather than retreating from it. They stopped when they saw her. That particular freeze. The moment of recognition followed by the scramble to decide how to respond. She kept walking to the equipment rack at the far wall, selected a practice staff, and found a clear section of ground. She began her Ashweld morning form. It was not a Darkmoor form. It was quieter, more fluid, built less around explosive power and more around controlled momentum, using the body's weight, redirecting force rather than opposing it. Voss had taught her the first form in the 3rd week of her time with the Wanderers, when Seraphine's bond withdrawal headaches had finally subsided enough to let her focus. She had practiced it every morning since. She heard the 3 she-wolves stop sparring. She felt their attention shift to her. She kept moving. After perhaps 10 minutes, she heard footsteps. One of them, the tallest, with dark red hair and the particular posture of someone who is brave enough to be curious, but not yet certain they have the right to be, stopped a few feet away. "That's not a Darkmoor form," the girl said. "No," Seraphine agreed, without breaking the sequence. "It's Ashweld." "Is it? Could you show us?" A pause. Then, the addition of someone who has been taught manners and is choosing to use them. "If that's not an intrusion." Seraphine came to a rest, looked at the girl, then at her two companions, who had moved closer with the careful, sideways movement of people trying to look casual while being entirely invested. She thought about Kale's words in the Great Hall. What I demonstrate, you learn. And what you learn becomes the shape of this pack. She looked at these three she-wolves, young, uncertain, pushing through it, and she made a small, quiet decision. Come here, she said. She spent an hour with them. It was not planned. It was not strategic. It was simply the natural extension of having something and recognizing that sharing it cost nothing and gave something real. She taught them the first Ashweld form, then the second. Then, because the tallest girl caught on quickly and the other two were ferociously determined not to be outpaced, the beginning of the third. By the end of the hour, she had an audience. Pack members who had drifted past the training ground and stopped. Warriors, older she-wolves, a couple of elders who stood at the fence with the specific focused attention of people who are seeing something they have not seen before and are deciding what to make of it. She didn't perform for them. She simply continued. When she was done, she replaced the staff on the rack and turned to find Aldrich standing at the training ground entrance. He had been there a while, by the look of him. He'd like to speak with you, Aldrich said. When you're ready. She nodded. I'll wash first, she said. Of course. She meant it practically. She also meant it in the other sense. In the sense of arriving at important conversations on her own terms, in her own time, without the breathless urgency of someone responding rather than deciding. She washed. She changed. She braided her hair in the Ashweld style. Simple, practical, a decision she had made 2 years ago and had not reconsidered. Then she went to find Kale. He was in the war room. Not his chamber. The war room, the large stone space where the pack's strategic planning happened, with its long table and its territory maps spread across the surface, and its wall of old weapons that had been there long before the current alpha and would be there long after. He was standing at the table when she entered. Not sitting. Standing, which told her something. He was strong enough to stand for sustained periods now. Whatever her blood had done, it had done it thoroughly. He looked up when she walked in. She sat across the table from him. He remained standing for a moment. Then he sat too. The territory maps were between them. The ink and parchment depiction of Darkmoor's lands, the surrounding pack territories, the Ashweld wandering routes traced in faint dotted lines along the borders. She looked at the maps. Found the Ashweld route she had traveled when the messenger found her. Found the eastern border where she had lived for 2 years. She looked at it for a moment, the distance made visible. And then she looked at Kale. Corin's tribunal is set for 3 days from now, he said. You'll be called as a witness. If you're willing. I'm willing. A pause. He'll be exiled, Kale said. Pack law doesn't have a more severe consequence than that, short of execution, which is reserved for blood crimes. He paused. What he did doesn't quite qualify, but it comes close enough that I expect the tribunal to treat it accordingly. Good, she said. Silence. The kind that had something in it. He looked at the maps. She waited. I've been trying to find the right order for the things I need to say to you, he said. Since last night. He stopped. I can't find a right order. So I'm going to say them, and you can do with them what you decide. All right, she said. He looked at her directly. The Ashweld route, he said, nodding at the map. I had it monitored for 18 months. After that first report, I told myself, as I sat on the parapet, it was protocol, a safety concern. His jaw tightened. The truth is that I watched the reports come in every 2 weeks and I knew, before I admitted it, that I was watching for evidence of whether you were well. She said nothing. In the 14th month, he continued, one report mentioned that you had begun training with the Wanderers. Physical training. That you were progressing quickly. I remember reading that and feeling. He paused. Pride. That was the word I eventually identified. Not possession. Not anything I had a right to feel. Just the specific, irresponsible, uncomplicated feeling of being proud of someone. A pause. I had no right to that. No, she agreed. You didn't. In the 17th month the report stopped. You'd moved too far east for my scouts to track reliably. He was quiet for a moment. I noticed when they stopped. More than I wanted to. She looked at him. Kale, she said. He met her eyes. What do you want? She asked. Not from my blood. Not for the pack. From me. Specifically. She held his gaze. Say it plainly. We are past the point where anything less than plainness is acceptable. He held the eye contact. Did not look away. I want the chance to know you, he said. The real version. The one that exists now. Not the one I invented and rejected and was wrong about. He paused. I'm not asking to restore what was. I understand that what was is not the point. I'm asking. Another pause. I'm asking if there is a future version of this that you could imagine. Not as a debt owed or a duty performed. As a genuine choice. His voice was careful but not guarded. Honest in a way that had cost him the preparation time he'd had. One you make because you want it. If such a thing is possible. She was quiet. She looked at the maps between them. At the territory lines. At the routes and the borders and the distances. She thought about the hollow place in her chest. The way it had been last night, smaller than before. Changed. Not filled, but different. She thought about the morning in the training ground. The 3 she-wolves. The hour of teaching. The pack members at the fence with their careful, watching attention. She thought about the east parapet and the wind, and what it had felt like to stand in this place and be seen. She thought about what Voss had told her, the night before she left. Whatever you decide, make sure it's yours. She lifted her eyes from the maps. To him. I'm not staying in Darkmoor the way I was here before, she said. If there is anything forward, it does not look like what was arranged by our fathers. It does not look like me trying to fit myself into the shape this pack expects. I know. I have a life, she said. A real one. With the Ashweld. With Voss and Dusk and Pip. With the things I've learned and the woman I've built. She held his gaze. Any future that exists does not ask me to give that up. It asks what I want to build from here. On my own terms. Yes, he said. And it will be slow, she said. Slower than whatever you're feeling right now. Because what you're feeling right now has the intensity of someone who nearly died and was saved. That's not nothing. But it is not the same as what is built over time. I know that, he said. I'm not asking for fast. A pause. I have spent 2 years being a man I don't entirely respect. I would like to spend the next 2 years, longer, as long as it takes, being someone worth the standard you just described. She looked at him. At the storm-gray eyes she had once loved and then learned to stop loving, and was now looking at with clear, open, wide-awake eyes that hadn't been there before. She felt the bond remnant, that involuntary, ancient thing, respond to his presence. She acknowledged it, didn't let it decide, made the decision herself. I'll stay for the tribunal, she said. 3 days. He nodded. After the tribunal, I'll go back to the Ashweld. I have things to finish there. People I owe a return to. She paused. And then, she let the sentence sit open. Let the openness be what it was. Not a promise. Not a refusal. A door that she had not closed. He understood. She could tell by the way his shoulders changed. Not relaxing, exactly. Releasing something. The tension of a man who has been asking a question and has been given an answer that is neither yes nor no, but is honest. That is more than I deserve, he said. It is, she agreed. He almost smiled. It was a very small thing. The beginning of something rather than the thing itself. But it was real, and she filed it away with the other real things. Then she stood up. I'm going to send a message to Voss, she said. She'll want to know I'm all right. Of course. He paused. Is there anything you need? For the message? Or for the days here? She picked up her cloak from the chair back. 3 things, she said. Name them. Access to the sacred text library. Full access. She held up one finger. I want to know everything Marin knows about my bloodline. A second finger. The 3 she-wolves from the training ground this morning. I want to work with them until I leave. A pause. And the third, he asked. She met his eyes. Stop monitoring the Ashweld routes, she said. A beat. Then, quietly, with something in his face she could not entirely name. Done, he said. She nodded. She walked to the door. Seraphine. She stopped. Turned. He was looking at her with the full weight of a man who has been many things and is slowly, painfully, deciding which of them he intends to keep. The word you said yesterday, he said. Before you gave me the blood. That you refuse to let what I did define what you do. That you are the choice you make. He paused. I want you to know that I understand, now, why the moon goddess chose you. She looked at him. It wasn't my bloodline, she said. No, he agreed. It wasn't. She left. And she did not press her hand to her chest in the corridor this time. She simply walked. Steadily. Forward. 3 days. She spent them well. The sacred text library occupied a low-ceilinged room behind the healer's wing. Shelves of ancient bound manuscripts and rolled scrolls. The smell of old ink and older wolf leather. The particular hush of a room that had held important things for a long time. Marin gave her full access without hesitation. She spent the mornings with the texts. The bloodline was extensive was the word she kept coming back to, in the written record. Not common knowledge. Not the kind of thing that appeared in the pack histories that Alpha heirs were taught. But woven through the oldest texts, the pre-Darkmoor manuscripts, the records that predated current pack territories. References to a line of wolves the moon goddess had specifically designed as living counterweights. Where there is poison, they carry cure. Where there is curse, they carry dissolution. They are not healers by training, but by nature. Their power does not diminish with use. It is by design without limit. Without limit. She read that twice. Set the text down. Looked at her hands. Her plain, ordinary hands that sealed their own cuts in minutes. Without limit. She spent the afternoons with the 3 she-wolves. The tall red-haired one was named Bryn. She was 17, the daughter of a senior warrior, and she had the particular hunger of someone who has been told, subtly, persistently, by the shape of the world around her, that she is allowed to want less than she actually wants. Seraphine recognized it immediately. She did not comment on it directly. She simply taught the Ashweld forms, the tracking principles, the way to enter a difficult moment centered rather than braced, the difference between the power that announces itself and the power that does not. She taught Bryn that you can be quiet and formidable, that stillness is not the same as absence, that the gifts which take time to reveal themselves are not lesser gifts. Bryn was an extraordinary student. The other 2, Lyra and Cass, 16 and 15 respectively, were less naturally gifted but more persistently determined, which Seraphine had found, in her own experience, was often the more durable quality. She taught them all, and by the 3rd afternoon, she had acquired a wider audience than 3. She did not perform for them. She simply continued. The tribunal convened on the morning of the 3rd day. The great hall again. The ring of pack faces again. But the atmosphere was different from the gathering 2 days before. That had been revelation. This was reckoning. The specific weight of a community sitting in judgment of something that had been done within itself. Corin stood at the center of the floor. He had not broken. She had expected that. He was too proud for easy breaking, but he had contracted. The particular diminishment of a person whose plan has failed and who is now standing inside the failure, unable to leave it behind. She gave her testimony from a standing position, not because she was asked to stand, because she chose to. She laid out what she had observed. His presence in the chamber, his reaction to the cure, the scent signature she had identified. She presented it the way Voss had taught her to present complex information. Cleanly, without excess, with the precision of someone who knows the difference between what they observed and what they concluded. Corin's advocate offered 2 challenges to her account. She responded to both with the same precision. The tribunal, 7 elders presiding without alpha interference, as pack law required, listened to everything. Then they deliberated. For 2 hours. She spent them in the library. When Aldrich came to find her, she knew from his face before he spoke. Exile, he said. Immediate and permanent. Him and the 3 warriors in correspondence. The pack's formal record will reflect the full nature of the conspiracy. He paused. The Alpha's formal record will also reflect, he paused, something moving through his expression that she had not seen from him before. His own role in creating the conditions Corin exploited. His own acknowledgement. She looked at Aldrich. He insisted on that, Aldrich said. He included himself. Yes. She looked at the text open on the table before her. Where there is poison, they carry cure. She thought about what that meant. Not just in terms of blood. Not just in terms of the supernatural mechanics of what had happened in Kale's chamber 3 nights ago. She thought about what it meant in rooms. In packs. In the way one person could carry the antidote to a specific kind of poison by being exactly what they were. By refusing to become smaller than they were. By choosing, even at cost, to remain themselves. She closed the text gently. Tell him I'll be ready to leave by midday, she said. Aldrich blinked. Leave. I said 3 days, she reminded him. I keep my word. Of course. He paused. Shall I inform him yourself? He may want. I'll say goodbye, she said. He doesn't need informing. She packed. It did not take long. She had arrived with a pack's worth of herself, and she was leaving the same way. Her cloak, her Ashweld supplies, the small leather-bound journal she had started 3 months into her time with the Wanderers and had been writing in since. She went to the east parapet one last time, stood at the railing, looked at the mountain. The frost had returned last night. The courtyard below was white-edged, crisp, the air sharp enough to sting. The light on the stone was the particular low-angled clarity of late autumn and high ground, the kind that made everything look precise and cleanly defined. She breathed it in. She heard him before she saw him. The careful, announcing footsteps. He appeared at the parapet entrance. He was fully himself again, upright, present, occupying his own height without the illness pulling at him. He was wearing his pack cloak over dark leather, and he looked like the mountain had made him, which was how he had always looked when she first knew him. But his face was different. She could see it clearly now, in the unsparing autumn light. The thing illness had stripped from him had not fully grown back. She didn't think it would. She thought it was better this way. This version of him, with the armor thinner and the face more available. More honest. He stopped at the far end of the parapet, keeping the distance. "Aldrich told me," he said. "I know." He was quiet. She looked at him. "I'll be back for the winter solstice marking," she said. He went very still. "You don't have to." "I know," she said again. "It's not about what I have to." She turned to face him. The pack observes the solstice with the full-blood ritual. The old one, the bonding renewal. "I've been reading the texts." She held his gaze. "My bloodline is referenced in the solstice text specifically, as a participant in the full ritual, not a passive one." He processed that. "The moon goddess apparently has an opinion about my participation," she said dryly. Something moved in his face. The beginning of something she had seen once before, the very small version of it in the war room. A smile. A real one this time. Small. Brief. But unmistakably real. "Is that the only reason?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. She let the moment be exactly as long as it needed to be. Then, "No," she said. He held her gaze. Said nothing. Because he understood. She could see that he understood. That she had just given him something. Not a promise. Not a resolution. Something more honest than both of those things. A genuine answer. She turned back to the mountain. "Walk me to the gate," she said. He fell into step beside her. They walked the length of the parapet in silence. Side by side. Not touching. But close enough that the air between them was shared air. Warmer than it should have been for the season. Charged with something that neither of them named yet because it was too new for names. The gate guards straightened when they saw the Alpha. Cale nodded to them. They stood aside. She walked through the gate. Stopped on the other side. Turned. He was standing in the gateway. The dark stone arch framing him. The torches on both sides burning in the cold air. And he was looking at her with those storm-gray eyes that held now something she had not seen in them in the Great Hall 2 years ago. She saw it clearly. She held it clearly. Let it be what it was. "Solstice," he said. "Solstice," she confirmed. She turned. She walked into the treeline, and the forest closed around her. The smell of pine and cold and wild things. The sound of her own footsteps on the frozen earth. The light filtering through the canopy in long pale columns that caught the dust and made it shimmer. She breathed. Deep. Full. The breath of someone who has walked out of something and toward something and knows, this time, the difference. She came back on the eve of the winter solstice. 6 weeks. She had spent them with the Ashweld, back in the Wanderers' camp. The familiar smell of wood smoke and herb bundles, Voss's steady eyes and Dusk's herb charts and Pip's quiet movement through the trees. She told them everything. Voss listened to all of it without interruption. When Seraphine finished, the older woman was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled between them. "Well," Voss said finally. "Well," Seraphine agreed. "What do you need from me?" Voss asked. Seraphine thought about it. "Tell me if I'm making a mistake," she said. Voss looked at her for a long moment. "You were willing to let him die," Voss said. "And then you chose not to. Not because you owed him. Not because you still carried the bond. But because it was the truest expression of who you had become." She paused. "Is going back different from that?" Seraphine thought about it. "No," she said. "Then you're not making a mistake," Voss said simply. "You're making a choice. Those are not the same thing." She spent the 6 weeks in motion. teaching the Ashweld wanderers the things she had confirmed in the Darkmoor library. The bloodline, its scope, its implications. She worked with dusk to document what the healer had noticed about the blood's properties, turning observation into record. She ran every morning. She trained. She wrote in the leather journal. Not about Kale mostly. About herself. About the shape of the woman she was now and the shape she was aiming toward. She received 3 letters from Darkmoor. The first was from Aldrich, formal, informational. Corin and the 3 warriors had departed under guard. The pack was stable. The tribunal records were complete. The second was from Bryn, barely legible, written with the urgent force of someone to whom writing did not come easily. She had been practicing the Ashweld forms daily. She had reached the third. She had also, in passing, challenged a senior warrior to a sparring match and won, which Seraphine found so entirely plausible that she laughed in a way she hadn't in a long time. The third letter was from Kale. She held it for 2 days before she opened it. Not from fear. From the desire to enter it on her own terms. She opened it at dawn on the second day, sitting at the edge of the Ashweld camp with the first light coming through the trees. He wrote the way she expected he would write, directly, with the economy of a man for whom words were instruments rather than decorations. Not formally, but carefully, the way someone writes when they are choosing to be honest and are not entirely certain how. He told her that the pack was asking about her. Not the inner circle. The pack. The ordinary members, the she-wolves, the younger warriors, the elders who had watched from the fence during the morning training sessions. He told her that Bryn had organized a group. She smiled at that. He told her about the changes he was making to the pack hierarchy, restructuring the inner circle with different criteria. Not dominance and visibility. Experience, wisdom, demonstrated care for the pack's well-being. The kind of qualities, he noted without elaboration, that did not always announce themselves loudly. He told her he was learning. He did not say learning what. He didn't need to. At the end of the letter, in the same even hand, I think about the parapet more than is reasonable. The morning specifically. The light and the frost, and the way you walk through the gate, as though you already knew where you were going. I hope you do. I think you do. The solstice fire will be lit at moonrise. I'll be at the gate. She read it twice, folded it, placed it in the journal. And she began to pack for the return. She arrived at the Darkmoor gate as the last daylight was leaving the sky. He was there, as promised, standing just inside the gate with his cloak drawn against the cold and his face turned toward the treeline. Toward her, as though he had been watching for exactly long enough that he'd gotten the direction exactly right. She walked through the gate, stopped in front of him. He looked at her. She looked at him. You came, he said. I said I would, she said. A pause. How are the Ashweld? Well, Voss sends nothing, which is her version of goodwill. Something moved in his face. The smile fuller this time. Still brief, but fuller. And the journal? He asked. She paused. How do you know about the journal? Bryn mentioned it in passing, he said. She said you were writing when she found you on the camp perimeter the morning you left. She is remarkably observant, Seraphine said. I noticed, he said. They walked into the keep together. The courtyard was prepared for the solstice. Torches in every bracket, cedar smoke rising from the great fire pit at the center. The sweet, sharp smell of winter herbs laid in bundles along the walls. The pack was gathering, moving in from the outer buildings, dressed in their solstice attire, ceremonial furs and dark wool, and the old wolf colors that had marked this territory for generations. It looked, she noticed this with a quiet shock, it looked alive. Not the controlled, performance of stability alive it had been when she arrived 3 weeks ago. Actually alive. The people moved differently. She couldn't immediately name the difference. Then she could. They moved like people who were not afraid of their alpha, who were not performing their loyalty, who were simply there, present, part of something. She looked at Kale, found him already looking at her. What did you change? She asked quietly. He considered it. I stopped treating authority as something that required distance, he said. She held his gaze. You were afraid of need, she said. You learned distance. Yes. And now I think, he paused. I think the strength is not in the distance. I think the strength is in being close enough to actually know the people you're supposed to lead. He looked at the gathering pack. My father was wrong about some fundamental things. Most fathers are, she said. He taught me that dependence was weakness. He was wrong. I know that now. He was quiet. I learned it from someone who had no reason to teach me anything. She looked at the fire. The solstice blaze was building, the cedar smoke thickening, the heat pushing outward from the pit, the light catching the faces of the gathering pack in the particular warm way of firelight that makes people look closer to their real selves than daylight usually allows. The ritual, she said. Tell me what the Darkmoor version looks like. He told her as they walked toward the fire. The solstice ritual was old, older than the current pack structure, older than the keep's walls. It had been practiced in this territory since the first wolves had claimed the mountain, and the bones of it had not changed. A gathering around fire, a speaking of names, a renewal of bonds. Pack bonds, familial bonds, the collective bond that tied a group of wolves to their territory and to each other. And in the oldest version, the version referenced in the pre-Darkmoor texts, the version Seraphine had found in the Darkmoor library, there was a second component, the blood renewal, a ritual that called for the participation of any wolf who carried sacred bloodline designation. She had read it 3 times. She understood now why the moon goddess had been building toward this. Not the cure. Not just the cure. This. The renewal. The moment when the pack's collective bond, weakened by what Corin had attempted, by the months of manipulation, by the years of distance between alpha and pack, was strengthened by something older and more fundamental than any individual's authority. The bloodline designed to give. Giving what packs needed most. Not power. Cohesion. She stood beside the fire. The pack gathered in the ring she remembered, but differently now. Without the watching and judging quality. Without the assessment. Just presence. Maren opened the ritual. The old words, the ancient wolf tongue, the sounds that predated any current language and carried meaning the way stone carries weight, without effort, simply by nature. She felt it when the collective bond activated. The feeling of being suddenly genuinely surrounded. Not physically, but in the deeper sense. The pack bond touching the edge of her awareness like warmth through a window. Not entering but present, acknowledged, real. She had not felt a pack bond in 2 years. She had not realized how much she had missed it. Maren turned to her. The bowl was there. The same clay bowl. The same ancient wolf script along the rim. The same blade. She looked at it. Then she looked at the pack. At Bryn across the fire, watching her with those careful, brave eyes. At Aldrich, standing at his alpha's left, his position, the one he had chosen, and this time without the weight of complicity in it. At the elders, the warriors, the she-wolves, the young wolves pressing close to their parents' sides. At Kale, standing at her right, close, not touching, but close enough to share the warmth of the fire. She picked up the blade. She did not hesitate this time. The cut was clean and the blood came dark and luminescent, and the pack, the whole ring of them, breathed in together at the sight of it. One collective intake, involuntary, primal. Their wolves recognizing what it was before their minds had caught up. The bowl went around. Not for drinking. This was not the cure ritual. This was the renewal. Each wolf touched the rim of the bowl and held it for a moment. And through the clay and the luminescent blood and whatever the moon goddess had built into her specific design, Seraphine felt it. Each connection, brief and individual and absolutely real. Each pack member's wolf, acknowledging hers. Not as a leader, not as a mate, as what she was. A member, returned, chosen, freely. When the bowl came back to her, she set it on the ground beside the fire, pressed her healed palm to her chest, breathed. She felt the hollow place. It was gone. Not filled with him. Not filled with the pack. Not filled with anything external or given or dependent on someone else's choices. Filled quietly with itself. With herself. The space that had been made by the rejection. The space that pain had carved. Had grown into something over 2 years of being alone and afraid and determined and trained and taught and tested. It had grown into room. Room for exactly who she was. Room she had built. And room, she realized, looking at the fire, at the pack, at the mountain and the stars and the moonlit stone, for whatever she chose to put in it next. She looked at Kale. He was watching the fire. Then he looked at her. The storm-gray eyes. The real face. The man who had been afraid and had run and was slowly, choosing differently. She held his gaze. After the solstice, she said quietly, under the sound of the ritual, beneath the old words Maren was speaking only to him. I need to go back east one more time. There are things in the Ashweld I owe a proper completion. I know, he said. When I come back, she paused. Let herself feel the full weight of what she was about to say. Let it be real before she made it words. When I come back, I would like to talk about what a different kind of arrangement looks like. One that isn't about arrangement at all. She held his gaze. One that's about choice. He was very still. My choice, she clarified. Made freely. On my terms. With full knowledge of what I'm choosing. A pause. And yours. Made the same way. He breathed. A long, slow breath. The kind that comes when a person has been holding something for a long time and has been given carefully the room to set it down. Yes, he said. Just that. Yes. The fire crackled. The pack moved around them in the ritual. The mountain stood above them in the dark, ancient and patient, having held this territory through everything it had ever faced. She turned her face toward the fire, felt the heat of it, the real, steady, certain heat of something that had been lit intentionally and was burning honestly. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, she was exactly where she was. Not fleeing, not arriving. Here. Fully, freely, undeniably here. And it felt, finally, irreversibly on her own terms. Like home. They found the record in the ancient text 11 months later. Maren discovered it while preparing the documentation of Seraphine's bloodline. The comprehensive account she had been compiling for the sacred library. The record that would remain in Darkmoor's archives long after any of them were alive to speak of it. The passage was near the back of the oldest bound volume. Barely legible, but clear enough. The cure-carrier bloodline was not placed by accident. The moon goddess does not move without intention. When a cure-carrier is rejected by a fated alpha, when the bond is severed by pride alone, the bloodline is activated. What was dormant becomes full. What was partial becomes complete. The wound is the key. The rejection is the catalyst. The goddess does not punish the alpha to protect the rejected wolf. She punishes the alpha to reveal the rejected wolf to herself. Maren read the passage to Seraphine in the library. Seraphine was quiet for a long time afterward. She looked at her hands. At the plain, ordinary, extraordinary hands. She planned it, she said. She prepared for the possibility, Maren said carefully. Which is not quite the same thing. She knew he might reject me. She knew the bloodline would only activate fully under pressure. Under a specific kind of wound. Maren was quiet. And she knew what you would do with it. Seraphine looked at the passage again. The wound is the key. The rejection is the catalyst. She thought about the winter forest. The hollow place. The moon, cold and high and apparently not as silent as she had believed. She thought about 3 days of walking. Voss's steady eyes. 2 years of becoming. She thought about what she had said in Kale's chamber before she gave her blood. I refuse to let what you did be the thing that defines what I do. She put the book down. She went to find Kale. He was on the east parapet, which made her smile quietly to herself. He was at the railing, looking at the mountain, his cloak catching the wind in the particular way of someone who has been standing there long enough to have stopped noticing the cold. She stood beside him, told him what the passage said. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the mountain. She used you, he said finally. Yes, she agreed. And you? A pause. Yes. Are you angry? She thought about it. I would have been, she said. A year ago. Maybe. She looked at the mountain too, the ancient dark shape of it, the snow on the upper reaches catching the faint moonlight and giving it back silver. Now I think, she stopped. Found the words she actually wanted. Now I think she trusted me. With a very difficult thing. And I proved I could hold it. He was quiet. She trusted you before you knew you were trustworthy, he said. Yes. That's not a small thing, he said. No, she agreed. She looked at the moon. Full tonight. The same moon that had watched her walk out of this keep 2 years ago. The same moon that had been her only witness when she pressed her fist to her chest in the winter forest and made herself a promise. I kept the promise, she said. Quietly. Not to him. To herself. Or perhaps to the moon. He looked at her. She looked at him. And this time, for the first time, she did not look away first. She held the gaze. All the way into it. Into the storm-gray eyes that held, now, more than they had when she first met them. More complexity. More honesty. More of the particular quality that comes to people when they have survived something they caused and chosen to reckon with it rather than escape it. More of the thing she had begun, carefully and slowly and on her own terms, to move toward. His hand, unhurried, questioning, giving her every opportunity to step back, moved to cover hers on the railing. She let it. The warmth of it moved through her. Different from the bond, different from what had been taken and what had broken. This was new, built from different materials, from choice not fate, from truth not arrangement, from the long, difficult, extraordinary work of two people deciding, with clear eyes and full knowledge, to try. The wind moved across the parapet. The torches held their light against it. Below, the pack moved through its evening, cooking fires and raised voices, and the particular alive noise of a group of people who have found, again, something worth belonging to. Above the moon, patient, full, keeping whatever it kept. She turned her face to it, felt the cold and the light and the specific sensation of standing fully in her own life. In a place she had not expected to return to, in a moment she had not expected to want, in a body she had earned and a self she had built and a power she had always carried without knowing it was there. She was the wound. She was the key. She was the cure. And she was completely, irrevocably, entirely on her own terms. Herself. The moon held her there a long time. And the mountain did not forget her name.